Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi tahirin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajjal farajah. So continuing with lesson number 34. So we've established now that this me starts with knowledge, and the soul from day one is evolving. At some time, this soul, the word me or I can qualify, and it qualifies with knowledge. So before the knowledge factor, the word soul applies, and the soul has one identity, it's one individual, but there's no me, there's no I. And whatever you attribute to the soul, for example, in the first 4 months, its growth, its reproduction, its production rather, its shaping, its acquisition of limbs and organs, all that you can attribute to the soul, but there's no me. The me starts with knowledge. This is where we left off. So this knowledge factor is the beginning not of the soul, but rather the beginning of the I, the me. But this soul from day one is the same soul at 4 months, is the same soul at birth. It's the same soul that we have now. It's evolving. And as it's evolving, dimension after dimension, manifestation after manifestation, it's growing. But the knowledge factor starts at around 4 months. And this knowledge, it keeps on increasing. And one just keeps on going more and more. Now, there was one question in one of the previous sessions that he said, this knowledge that we're going to, does it have to be self-subsistent and independent knowledge and infinite knowledge? And the answer is yes. Why? Because we said everything is existence, and non-existence is impossible. This material realm, does it have an end? If you keep on going in this material realm, the physical realm of existence, will you stop anywhere? Whereafter they say this is the end. And if you say yes, then we'll ask, well, what is it beyond that? If you say there's something, well, so that wasn't the end. If you say there was nothing, well, we said non-existence is impossible. So even in the physical realm is infinite. You keep on going in this physical, keep on going. You'll never come to an end. You know, galaxy after galaxy, keep on going. You'll never come to an end. There's always physical realm of existence. Because if you come to an end in the physical realm, then you ask, what is there after that? If you say there's something, okay, that proves our point. It's continuing. If you say no thing, non-existence, we said is impossible. Non-existence. We don't have non-existence, yes. So if the physical realm is infinite, then the knowledge upon which this physical realm depends upon has to be infinite. The knowledge factor has to be infinite. And then we are acquiring more and more knowledge as we progress. In the beginning, there was a very bit of knowledge we had. Let's say at birth, even the child who's born, they have some knowledge. They are aware of me, the child that is born. It goes towards the mother's chest. These are all forms of knowledge. But as the child grows and grows, they acquire more and more knowledge, from deficiency to perfection. Deficiency, they get more and more knowledge. And then, in the previous lesson, he said, one never journeys towards an absolute unknown. There was an acquaintance of some sort, albeit little, that made one go towards that perfection. So that even the child has that concise knowledge, is going towards it. And then when they attain to and acquire that knowledge at the end, whatever amount they attain to, that which they attain to and that which they knew at the beginning, we said, هُوَ الْأَوَّلُ وَالْآخِرُ. It's the same. But that which they knew in the beginning, let's say as a child going towards the mother's chest, was knowledge in a very ijmali, indefinite sense. That which they acquire at the end is definitive, but the knowledge is the same. The knowledge factor is the same. So here we see that which is important for humans and which differentiates them from non-humans is to do with this knowledge. And the fact that humans manifest, like civilizations and many other manifestations which animals can't, shows that the essence of man is higher than the essence of an animal. They too have knowledge, but what they can manifest and what humans can manifest is different. And then even amongst humans there are differences, and the forms of knowledge vary. Now, Imam Khomeini, in his letter to Gorbachev in the late 80s, he said, man is always after knowledge and power. We'll never stop. We'll always go after power and knowledge. He mentions these two, although power too depends on knowledge. And he said this in 2 sentences. He said, this shows that there's an infinite knowledge and power that makes people move towards it. It means there is an infinite knowledge and power, an infinite knowledge, infinite power, that man would, if they were always to live, they would always go towards it. There would be no stop. Okay. So now, then they spoke about, in the previous session, that what's the relationship between this soul, which is growing and knowledge is being added to it moment to moment, and the exeter. What is this kind of relationship? Because sometimes a teacher is teaching something to a student. Is the teacher an exeter? What is the teacher saying? He's only giving sound waves. Sound waves are physical. How can sound waves move the soul from deficiency to perfection? How can sound waves make the soul acquire more knowledge? Because the sound waves aren't knowledge. The book is just something material, black and white. So the exeter can't be just anyone. And there has to be a relationship between the exeter and the soul. And that relationship, that has to be opened up, which he will open. Okay, so that was just a bit of a summary of the previous sessions. Okay, so man, lesson 34. Man has 2 foods, knowledge and bread. And each of these foods has a container. The container of food is the stomach. The container of knowledge is the me, which is other than the body. Between the container and the contained, so the contained would be knowledge or bread. The container would be the soul or the stomach. But between the container and the contained, there has to be a synchronicity. They have to be in harmony with one another. Physical food, the container has to be physical. See, there has to be a harmony. If the contained is not physical, the container is also not physical. There has to be a synchronicity here. You can't put physical food in an immaterial container. It's impossible. So, between the consumer and the consumed, that's just another way of phrasing it. Between the container and the contained, between the consumer and the consumed, there has to be a synchronicity. So let's see what knowledge is, in order to see what the container of knowledge is. What is the reality of knowledge? We've understood to some degree, but we're going to do more. What's the reality of something material? But what's the reality of something which we call knowledge? What is the stuff it's made out of? Okay, because if we explore, the more we discover what is the stuff that knowledge is made out of, that will give us indications to what the container, the soul, what that is made out of. Because of the principle, there has to be a synchronicity between knowledge, the contained, and the container, the soul. If you know what physical food is, you'll have some idea of what the physical stomach is. It's going to be physical. If you know what knowledge is, you'll know what the container is all about. Okay, so let's open up knowledge, he says. We have in our knowledge different types of perceptions. Some of them are particular concepts we have. And usually it's perceived through the five senses. For example, when you say a particular tree, an orange tree, it's something particular. You see it with the eyes and you perceive it. Where do you perceive it? It's inside you. If you put your eyes here, the eyes itself is something material, it doesn't see anything. And when you close your eyes, you still have that particular concept of that orange tree. So when you see an orange tree, your eyes is an instrument, but the eyes are not seeing that orange tree. The soul is seeing the orange tree, because the eye is something material. If you put your eye on a table, this physical eye, it's something material that can't see. So when I say I am seeing an orange tree, the soul is seeing it. When the soul is seeing it, it means that perception of the orange tree is within me. And that's why if I close my eyes, the perception of the orange tree is still with me, the orange tree. Okay? Anything particular, yes, the five senses, which are faculties of the soul, they are instruments, but the soul is seeing, the soul is hearing, the eye is hearing, seeing, touching, and so on and so forth. Or for example, X person, X stone, or X sound, a particular sound. These are all particular concepts. This is one kind of perception that we have. Now, some concepts are not particular. It's not a particular tree. It's a very general concept, like love, existence, light, or tree without any limits. The essence of a tree, without any, if it's big, small, no. Nothing to do with big, small, particular characteristics. The essence of a tree, the essence of a human, what love is, not the love of a person or love towards an animal or love toward, no, the essence of love, existence, general, the universal concepts. So this is another set of concepts that we have. But with these concepts, they're very universal. What do I mean by universal? they're not limited in any way. Because once you limit them, they become particular concepts. If you say my love, or the animal's love towards something, or the big tree. No, we want tree, finished. Human, light, existence, love, whatever. But without any limits. So they're universal perceptions, these are. Now, what's the difference between particular concepts and universal concepts? He says that with respect to the particular concepts, like the orange tree, so there really is a tree here, and you've now perceiving it, the soul is perceiving it. With this orange tree in your mind, it's in your mind, the perception is a mental perception. You can divide the orange tree. You can divide it. If you just close your eyes and see an orange tree, you can envisage a left and a right. You can envisage above the tree, the lower parts of the tree. You can divide the tree. Particular concepts you can divide. It's divisible. But with universal concepts, the concept of a human, or love, or existence, or light, these are the limit, not human in a particular shape or form, the essence of a human, the essence of any given thing, without any limits. Otherwise, with limits, they become a particular human, or a particular light, or a particular existent. No, we don't want that. The universal concept of it. That universal concept of a human without any limits, it applies to you, everyone. The universal concept of it. Universal concepts you can't divide. You can't say, oh, there's a left and there's a right. You can't say it has this much weight or color, or it's the top part of it or the bottom part. Universal concepts you can't divide. That's a delicate point. Look, it's very simple. We're just introspecting within ourselves. With universal concepts, you can't divide them anymore. With particular perceptions, you were able to divide. But with universal perceptions, you can't divide them. So, with this latter group of perceptions, the universal ones, we can't divide it into length or breadth or width. You can't say a left side or a right side. And therefore, the stuff that universal perceptions are made out of has to be different to the stuff that particular perceptions are made out of. Why does it have to be different? Because one is divisible, one is not divisible. So they're not the same exactly. Look, with physical things, physical food, physical stomach, microphone, this, me, well, the physical aspect of me, the table, all these have similar characteristics. Length, breadth, depth, weight, color. But now, we're speaking about knowledge. For now, we've divided it into two different types of perceptions. One was particular, one was universal. With the universal type, they can't be divided. The particular type can be divided. We conclude something. They're both knowledge, but the stuff that universal concepts are made out of is different to the stuff that particular perceptions are made out of. Universal concepts, they can't be divided. Not even like, the sweetness on an apple. With an apple, a sweet apple, if you cut it into half, the sweetness would be divided. It's just an apple, something physical. You divide it, sweetness is in this half and that half. With universal concepts, there's no form of dividing. You can't envisage any form of dividing. So, here we see that this form of knowledge, universal concepts, here the container of universal concepts, where we said the container and contained, there has to be a synchronicity, so the container of universal perceptions, they also cannot be divided. You can't divide that container. The container which is containing universal perceptions is not divisible. It's indivisible. So the container of knowledge is something other than the container of the normal containers that we see, like a glass of water or a bucket or a basket or that kind. This is something different. The container of knowledge, and we've only gone through one aspect of knowledge, but the container of knowledge is different. It's not like the material containers that we have around us. So we must try and prove this, that this container of knowledge is something beyond material. It's immaterial. Right now, there are signs that this is the case, but it has to be proved. It has to be established. Okay. Now, so here he ends and says it's time to add a number of extra principles here. Number 34. Seeking an absolute unknown is impossible. We have come from somewhere that existed from the very beginning, and when we learn knowledge, we progress and move towards it. That was 35. 36. Thinking is defined as the movement of the soul from that which they have acquaintance in a concise manner to that which one acquires definitively, from deficiency to perfection. That movement of the soul where it knows something, then it knows something more perfect. This journey is called thinking. And number 37, the container of knowledge is not like any other container, because however much knowledge we acquire and fit into the container, the space of the container increases, and one is ready to be a recipient of higher and more knowledge. That's from the hadith, but he's also proved it from an aqli point of view. And finally, knowledge has to be synchronous with its container. Like food is synchronous with its container. Okay, so here we end lesson 34. In lesson 35, he starts by saying there must exist synchronicity between the container and the contained. And he says man has a container, and man has many containers, but one of the containers of man, that which is contained in it, is knowledge. So the question is now, can the container of knowledge be a body part, a part of the body, one of the limbs, one of the organs? More specifically, can it be the brain? Can knowledge, the container of knowledge, can it be the physical brain? Okay? Or is brain, which the brain is material, it's physical. If you put a brain on a table, can the brain rationalize? No. It's only when it's working in synchronicity with the soul. Otherwise, once it detaches from the soul, the brain is matter. Matter can't move. Matter can't perceive. But is knowledge, is it in the brain right now as we live with all our organs intact? Can we say the container of knowledge is the brain whilst we're living? i.e., he says, is it like a tape which records sound. The brain, though, is recording knowledge. You know how we have tapes, 90-minute, 60-minute tapes? Sound is recorded on it. The weight of the tape doesn't increase, but it has sound recorded on it. Is knowledge recorded in the brain like sound is recorded in the tape? Although one has to now say, one has to look at this suspiciously, because sound is something physical. Sound waves are physical. Whereas knowledge, so far, what we've gathered is it's not physical, knowledge itself. So in the same way that sound is recorded on a tape, and that tape doesn't add in its weight or its volume, is knowledge recorded in the brain? It's a question I suppose we have to kind of answer this question, because many people may say everything is in the brain, knowledge is in the brain. Is this true or not, this analogy? If it was true, and knowledge is in the brain, and the brain is something physical, if this was true, that the brain and knowledge is like the tape and sound, for example, here there would be no difference, he says, between the container of knowledge and the container of bread. Why? In the sense that both containers have length, breadth, depth, volume, weight. If you want to say knowledge is in the brain, like sound is in the tape, you will have to say, therefore, this container of knowledge is just like the container of bread. It has dimensions to it: length, breadth, and width. And it's evident that any given limb or organ, including the brain, it has dimensions, it has a weight, it has volume, it has a length. The brain too has these. It's something physical. And whatever you want to attribute to a given place, the property that you want to give that place shouldn't be more than that place. For example, whiteness of a wall, which is 10 meters, the whiteness shouldn't surpass 10 meters if it wants to be the whiteness of the wall. Or the sound of the tape shouldn't, if the tape is 60 minutes, the sound shouldn't be of 70 minutes or 80 minutes. It can't take it. Look, when you talk in volumes and length and breadth, that which wants to come on the place, on the tape, on the wall, shouldn't surpass the dimensions of the wall or the tape. Now you're saying knowledge is going to be in the brain. We gave one example of knowledge, the universal perceptions. Here Ayatollah Hassan says that we said that we perceive of things that are simple. Simple means it has no limits or definitions. When we said human, not human with a particular trait or characteristic, the essence of human. Light, love, existence, without any limits. These are universal perceptions. We said that we perceive of things that are simple, i.e., free from limits and volume, like the concept of love. Not love of X person or love of an animal, or no, love itself, the essence of love. It's a simple concept. Simple means it's free from any limit or particularity. It's not like the orange tree. We said that we perceive of things that are simple, meaning they're free from limits and dimensions. And so were these universal perceptions to be assigned onto the brain, they must also follow suit of such a place. When you're putting whiteness on a wall, or sound on a tape. When you halve the wall, the whiteness is halved. When you halve the tape, the sound will be halved, 2 parts. The wall and the tape, like the brain, is physical. Now you want to put a universal concept limited to the brain. If you therefore halve the brain, you have to halve the universal concept. But we said universal perceptions are indivisible. So the brain can't be a locus for indivisible perceptions. It's not possible. At the end of the day, this brain is physical. And so, were the universal concepts to be assigned to the brain, they must follow suit of such a place and be divisible, like the sweetness and apple example. But these concepts can't be divided. Therefore, the container of these universal perceptions can't be divided and cannot therefore be the brain. In addition to this, it seems no physical thing can record knowledge. If you say books and scripts and teachers, they have knowledge, we say no, they don't have knowledge. Books, how can a book have knowledge? It's only black and white script. How can a talk, these are sound waves coming to you. I'm not giving you knowledge. The teacher isn't giving you knowledge. Your knowledge is increasing, but I'm not the exiter. The book is not the exiter. The video is not the exiter. The sound waves, they can't be the exiter. They can't increase your knowledge. These things are all physical. How can something physical increase your knowledge? There's something else happening. These are preliminaries. They're not the cause. Remember when we said the relationship between the exiter and the soul, they can't be mutually exclusive. Well, sound waves, book, physical book, all these things are mutually exclusive to the soul. So they can't be the exiter. The relationship has to be much more closer. These are preliminaries to knowledge, the book, the teacher and other things. When we read the book is not a mu'allim. The book is not even alim. Remember, the exiter must have the perfections that the soul wants to acquire. The book doesn't have those. It's something material. The tape is not alim. The teacher is just giving sound waves. Sound waves are not alim. And at the same time, we perceive that this reality, when we say, I have knowledge, you're attributing knowledge to yourself. You also say, I have a brain. All these things you're attributing to yourself. It's one reality. And that reality is me, my brain. You also say, I have knowledge. But this container of this brain can't encompass knowledge itself. It's something physical. Whereas knowledge is something beyond physical. There has to be a synchronicity between the container and the contained. In any case, you can't say, I have a brain, and that this knowledge is in the brain, therefore. Because with this brain, which has these dimensions, length, width, and breadth, something which has these dimensions, these material dimensions, can't be a container to those universal perceptions. And so, with the accumulation of knowledge, people gain more and more knowledge. They become enlightened, they become existentially stronger through this knowledge. But the brain is the same brain. It doesn't become, actually with time the brain may even become older. But with time your knowledge and you existential are becoming stronger and stronger. So Ayatollah Hassan sort of ends here and says this was just a simple proof that the container of knowledge is other than the brain, is other than any physical limb. And it's the nafs, the soul, the me, which is other than the body. And he says other proofs will follow later. It's still the beginning of our academic suluk. So we must progress slowly but surely. He ends there. Just one thing I want to add here is that some people may say, look, in this brain, there's a part of the brain, if you stimulate, it's to do with your eyes. If you stimulate, this part of the brain is to do with your hearing, for example, at the back of the brain, for example. This part of the brain, so we're dividing it. Someone may bring this, but it's just like the eye or the ear. You're just making it in different components now. That part of the brain which is making you see or hear, is it physical or not? It's something physical. So just like the eye is an instrument for the soul to see, and the ear is an instrument for the soul to hear, the brain is an instrument for the soul to rationalize and to do many other things. But it's physical at the end. So these knowledge you can't say knowledge is in the locus of the brain. Yes. As for example, my dear friend here from India would say, Baba, you have to come out of the brain. You have to get out of the brain now. Knowledge is something else. Forget the brain, it's something physical. We're talking about a reality, knowledge. Get out of it. Okay. Lesson number 36. So, ilm, knowledge, and its container, therefore both of them are beyond matter. They're beyond physical. Knowledge and the container of knowledge. It's metaphysical. It means, meta means beyond physical. It's not physical. We also said knowledge is the criterion to nobility. The more knowledge one has, the more nobility is assigned, because they can manifest more. And every deficient entity which moves, like the soul, which moves to perfection, it must do so through an exeter. The exeter pushes them, makes them exit from a state of deficiency to a state of perfection. And we said the exeter must itself possess that perfection. Otherwise it won't be able to be a cause of the soul learning that perfection when the exeter itself doesn't have it. And we said the exeter has to also be metaphysical, because it's granting something metaphysical to the soul. If we want to give knowledge, the exeter also therefore has to be metaphysical. And the exeter must be alim, must have that knowledge and have a container of knowledge in order to grant that perfection to others. So, this exeter, this soul, the container of knowledge, these two realities we can say are metaphysical. We only say that this exeter, which is the cause for the soul's movement from deficiency to perfection in knowledge, has to have that perfection. If it doesn't have that perfection, it can't make the soul move from deficiency to perfection, moment to moment. Now this exeter, based on what we've said so far, seems to be knowledge per se, that infinite knowledge. And everything which is moving from deficiency to perfection, it seems that this infinite knowledge is the cause. But that's not the end of the story. So we've become acquainted now with two metaphysical things: knowledge and the exiter. And then Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh says, we have travelled from the dunya to akhirat. Look, lesson 36. He says we've travelled from the dunya, we've travelled to akhirat, to the hereafter. And our only guide was through the essence, truth, and reality of our self, of our soul. Understanding that the soul has to be metaphysical, we are now in akhirat, in the hereafter. The difference between Western civilizations and Eastern civilizations, the Western civilization, they don't believe in akhirah. They don't have an akhirah in their ideology. There's no akhirah. Everything is what you see, limited to the five senses. That's a difference here. And actually, in that way, that's why they don't believe in the soul. They don't believe in this immaterial soul. They just believe in this physical realm. And even if they do believe the soul, they say the soul has to be physical. What that is, we don't know. But this is something very important, that the difference of ideology that we have. One ideology believes in akhirah, hereafter. One ideology does not believe in akhirah, the modern Western ideology. The reason is because one believes in the soul, one doesn't believe in the soul. Once you believe in the soul, and that it's something metaphysical, Ayatollah Hassan says, now from the dunya, our material dimension, we've entered akhirah. Akhirah is a function of your soul. What's going to happen there is your soul is going to unravel and manifest in akhirah. Iqra, he didn't say this. He's only using aqli reasoning. But iqra kitabak. Kafa bi nafsika al-yawm alayka hasiba. Ahsant. Read your book. Is it this book? The Quran is saying, read your book. What kind of reading? With a physical eye? Or is it a different type of existential reading? Your book. Which book? Then it says, sufficient is your soul binafsika. Sufficient in the hereafter, your soul will suffice. Alayka hasiba, it will reckon against you, calculate what did you do with this soul. So the hereafter is a function of how the hereafter is a story of the soul unraveling itself. We don't see how it is doing it right now. It's doing it right now. But we're drowned in the physical realm. But when we die, we're going to see what this soul is going to unravel, is unraveling for itself. Manifesting moment to moment. We don't see it. There are some sins in the Quran, it says, some sins that when you do, you're burning your inside. Why don't we see it? But when we die, we see it. When we die, we see it. When we detach from the physical body, we see it. Everything, we see everything. All the sins we do is going to go against us. But read your soul, read your book. So the best book is you, is your soul. And we have travelled, he says, from the dunya to akhirat. And the only guide, he says, was through the reality of your soul. What book better than the soul do we have? There's no book better than your soul. It's the best book. Also, اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. The first thing the Holy Prophet said. What kind of iqra was it? Although these are now verses of the Quran, I don't want to, but that's very deep. The ba preposition here holds secrets here. So, man has two dimensions, broadly speaking, the physical and the metaphysical. We can't deny that. The metaphysical we can't deny now. This knowledge fact is important. This knowledge we've dissected a little bit. There are perceptions which you can't relate it to matter and materialistic characteristics. These universal perceptions, such that they can't divide, they can't be divided. The stuff it's made out of is different from matter. So we have a physical and we have a metaphysical dimension. And they are not mutually exclusive to one another. They're not disassociated from one another. Because right now we say me. It's one reality, we said. We say my brain, my knowledge, my hand, I am working, I am thinking, I am saying. It's one reality. But this one reality is multidimensional. Some of its dimensions are physical, some are metaphysical. But it's one reality. It's like the tree, with all its branches and leaves and fruits, it's one tree. All the leaves, branches, fruits are dimensions of that tree. They're not separate from the tree, they're in unity with the tree. Yes, when the apple falls, it becomes ripe and falls, that's now separate from the tree. It has, and this man with these, which is multidimensional, it's one reality, one individuality, one identity, and we say that is the soul. But the soul, for many months in the beginning, was the soul, but after 4 months we say this soul is still a soul, but we also say me to this soul because of the metaphysical dimension that has arisen at 4 months onwards. And that's supposed to be the essence of who we are, the metaphysical dimension. Otherwise, before 4 months in the womb, there was no me. Me does not qualify then. Okay. Then he says that concerning the development of the soul, the movement of the soul, and the action of the exeter of the soul, which moves the soul from deficiency to perfection, he says a number of questions arise. He mentions these questions, and lesson number 37 ends, and we'll end here inshallah. He says, is the soul and the exeter, are they mutually exclusive or not? All these will be answered later. Is the granting of the exeter to the soul like the granting, the giving in this dunya, when someone gives someone a present or an apple? Is the giving of the exeter to the soul such a giving, or is it different? Is anything reduced from the exeter when it grants perfection to the soul? Does the knowledge that is granted by the exeter and received by the soul, does it exist inside the soul or not? And if so, how? And if not, how does the soul evolve and develop and become stronger and stronger existentially? And if the exeter and the soul are not separate and are with one another, what is the nature of this being togetherness? This has to be opened up. And he says more dissection of knowledge is required. وصلى الله على محمد وعلى الطاهرين.